My friends, the purpose of my presentation is to demonstrate the risk of the outbreak of World War III with the military strategies of the United States and China in the fight for global hegemony. The history of humanity has been characterized by periods of global stability and also of systemic chaos. The period of global stability results from the hegemony exercised by a given country that leading the interstate world system, disseminates values and builds institutions that guarantee its supremacy without challenge. Systemic chaos occurs when the hegemony based on the economic and military power of a given country tends to be eroded, and the hierarchy of power and wealth among the great powers undergoes profound changes. When competition and conflict between great powers escalate beyond the regulatory capacity of existing structures, new structures emerge that further destabilizes the dominant power configuration. Giovanni Arrighi and Beverly Silver state in their work Chaos and the Governance in the Modern World System that the crisis and collapse of our world order result both from the weakening of existing structures based on the hegemonic power of the leading country and from the rise of new structures that seek systemic regimen through economic competition and of political and military contestation. This situation has occurred throughout human history, when, for example, the Netherlands surpassed Spain economically and militarily and established itself as the hegemonic power from the end of the 16th century until most of the 18th century. The same happening with England, which established itself as a hegemonic power from the second half of the 18th century until the beginning of the 20th century, economically and militarily supplanting the Netherlands, and after militarily defeating France at Waterloo in 1815, which also aspired to world power. England, a hegemonic power in the 18th and 19th centuries, was challenged at the end of the 19th century by Germany, which was fighting for the redivision of the world, which resulted in the First and Second World Wars. Germany's military defeat in the First and Second World Wars and England's economic decline contributed to the rise of the United States and the Soviet Union to the status of the hegemonic economic and military powers. After the Second World War, when the world was divided into two areas of influence, one led by the United States and the other by the Soviet Union. A bipolar system was a structure that lasted almost half a century of Cold War, under the risk of the outbreak of a nuclear war. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989 led the United States to exercise its hegemony, repeating, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989 led the United States to exercise its hegemony in the world without challenge until the beginning of the 21st century. Paul Kennedy states in his work The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers that the exercise of consensual global leadership, economic prosperity, and post-war American military power were in crisis. The decline of the United States has been accentuated in the first decade of the 21st century, while China has been economically rising, and it could become the world's greatest power by the middle of the 21st century. The rise of China increases the likelihood of war between the great powers, with a new era of tension between the United States and China, as dangerous as the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Robert Kaplan, an American journalist and scholar of international politics, states that the emergence of China as a superpower is inevitable, and that conflicts of interest with the United States will be unavoidable. He admits a military confrontation between the United States and China. This military confrontation with China is being prepared by the United States with the creation of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, formed by the United States, Australia, Japan, and India, and the AUKUS, tripartite military alliance, formed by Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, while China is adopting measures aimed at strengthening its military capacity by constantly increasing the military spending. Australia and the United States are already part of a strategic partnership focused on the Indo-Pacific region, together with India and Japan. The so-called Quad, from the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, created in 2007 and suspended for almost a decade, the Quad was revived in 2017 and has been gaining increasing prominence to this day. It's a strategic forum that includes military cooperation and defense exercise between the United States, Australia, Japan, and India. Japan and India are the two Asian powers that rival China, which also maintains tense territorial disputes with both and with other states in the region, such as the Philippines, Vietnam, or Malaysia. China sees the Quad not only as a challenge to its growing hegemony in the region, but also as a threat to its security, and together with the AUKUS, a camouflage attempt by the United States to create an Asian NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and its neighborhoods. The AUKUS, in turn, is an agreement aimed at countering China between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States to establish great military coordination of the three Pacific Ocean countries and the transfer of technology to Australia. In September 2021, these countries designated China as their main enemy in the Asia Pacific and began actively forming a military alliance against Beijing. The technology transfer from the United States and United Kingdom to Australia will take the form of nuclear-powered submarines for the Australian Navy, involving the preparation of human resources for the operation of nuclear submarines. Australia will become the seventh country to operate nuclear-powered submarines, after the United States, China, the United Kingdom, France, India, and Russia. The U.S. government is insisting on deploying nuclear-powered submarines in Australia, ostensibly to offset the growing naval capacity of China, which has the largest navy in the world, while the United States and its allies form the Asian NATO with the Quad and the AUKUS. China has significantly expanded its military power, including its nuclear warhead portfolio. It has increased its number of aircraft carriers, as well as fighter jets, tanks, and other vehicles. Today, it's the second country with the highest annual defense expenditure, behind only the United States. China People's Liberation Army, PLA, has the largest number of soldiers, around 2 million soldiers, and the largest naval fleet in the world, with almost 360 ships, and aspires to become a fully modernized combat force by 2027. To this end, it is building 2 new aircraft carriers to join 2 existing ones, developing long-range rockets and competing hypersonic missiles. Militarily, China is now a force that cannot be underestimated. In recent years, the People's Liberation Army, which commands the Chinese military, has made enormous advances in technology and innovation, as well as the power of its war arsenal. Dongfeng hypersonic missiles, for example, can travel 5 times the speed of sound and they are armed with the high explosive or nuclear warhead. China has also undertaken a rapid expansion program of its nuclear ballistic missiles with the aim of tripling the number of warheads while simultaneously building underground facilities to house these weapons in remote areas of the country's west. The military maneuvers between China and Russia are a response to the expansion of Asian NATO. The China-Russia military maneuvers are conducted to address threats to maritime security and preserve world peace and stability. The Chinese government has announced that it has begun conducting joint military maneuvers with Russia called the Joint Maritime Exercise 2024 in the waters and airspaces near the city of Zhejiang, Guangdong province, in the south of the country. The actions are taking place in the light of the possible risk that NATO expansion will extend its influence in Asia due to the alleged alliance between China and Russia in the war in Ukraine. This operation will further deepen the comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination between China and Russia for the new era. This has also been an intense military exercise in the Pacific by not only China, Russia, and North Korea. It was from the year 2000 that Russia decided to develop a strategic partnership with China. Russia considered that China could help it in its resistance to geopolitical ambitions of the United States in Eastern Europe, as well as in the Caucasus and Central Asia. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, was created in 2001 to establish a military alliance between Russia and China to combat terrorism, religious fundamentalism, and separatism in the Asian region. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a political and military cooperation organization that explicitly aims to be a counterweight to the United States and the NATO military forces. To stop China's rise as a hegemonic power on the planet, the North American military strategy is therefore focused on the Asia-Pacific region, strengthening NATO in Europe in the confrontation with Russia, and defend Israel in the Middle East to safeguard its oil interests and face the threat from Iran. The partnership between China and Russia also exists in the arms sector. Throughout the 1990s, arms sales to China were essential to the survival of the Russian military-industrial complex. Russia remained China's largest supplier of modern weapons in the 2000s. And more recently, there has been a transfer of Russian military technology for the production of new Chinese weapons. In addition, the Chinese remain major customers of Russian hydrocarbons. Ultimately, the strategic partnership between China and Russia is so fundamental to both countries that the difference of energy issues or other difference of interests which are natural between two powers, however important they may be, have not been able to threaten the collaboration between the two countries with regard to the attempt to limit the power of the United States. From what have just explained, it can be said that historically the end of a hegemonic power has been consummated with the economic and military victory of the new holder of world power. This happened with the Netherlands, when it economically and militarily surpassed Spain, which had established itself as the hegemonic power from the end of the 16th century until most of the 18th century. The same happened with England, which established itself as hegemonic power from the second half of the 18th century until the beginning of the 20th century, economically and militarily surpassing the Netherlands and after militarily defeated France, which also aspired to world hegemony. The United States and the Soviet Union jointly achieved the status of hegemonic powers after World War II, due to the economic decline of England and the military victory of both over Nazi Germany, which aspired to conquer world hegemony. From 1945 to 1989, the world was structured based on a bipolar system that lasted almost half a century of Cold War and the risk of the outbreak of a nuclear war that only did not happen because the Soviet Union fell apart in 1989, after which the United States has exercised its hegemony in the world without challenge until the beginning of the 21st century. For the first time in history, a great power, the United States, assumed world hegemony without the need to militarily defeat its opponent, the Soviet Union. From the beginning of the 21st century, the world hegemony of the United States began to be threatened by China, which emerged as an emerging power, and by an economically and militarily reinvigorated Russia. China, the world's second most populous nation with the world's largest army and navy, feels cornered by the United States and its allies in the Western Pacific with Asian NATO, Quad, and AUKUS. In response, President Xi Jinping recently announced that China would accelerate the expansion of its defense spending and named national security as the main concern in the coming years. So, how did we get to this point? Is the world moving closer to a catastrophic conflict in the Pacific between China and the United States and its allies? Although tensions have now risen sharply and new incidents may arise within this conflict, both sides, China and the United States, know that a war in the Pacific would be catastrophic for all. Despite knowing that a war in the Pacific would be catastrophic, all indications are that U.S. arms industry will strive to increasingly arm the United States and its allies in Europe with NATO and the Asia Pacific with Asian NATO, the Quad, and the AUKUS. It's no coincidence that the U.S. arms industry is the largest in the world. Of the 10 largest arms manufacturers in the world, 6 are American, 5 of which are leaders in the world arms industry. There is no doubt that the U.S. arms industry is currently sponsoring war in support of Ukraine against Russia, and the Middle East in support of Israel. It has participated in other wars in the past to make money. The record production of increasingly lethal and surgical weapons needs to be put to work in practice. The United States has the largest military spending in the world, 90% of the total, with 102 wars under its belt. The United States is probably one of the countries most involved in military actions in the world throughout history, which began with the annexation of Mexican lands to its territory and in the conquest of the Panama Canal. It's no coincidence that the United States is one of the countries that benefit most economically from armed conflicts, since the largest arms exporters in the world are North American. In addition to the sale of ammunition and weapons, the United States also monetizes with security and militarily training contracts, which makes many members of the U.S. Congress see wars as a machine for employing and money for the country. Peace for the United States could cost it dearly. These facts are what led many to question the real motivation of the United States in acting to defend Ukraine, which has been in a state of tension with Russia for years and in defending Israel in permanent conflict with the Palestinian people and Arab countries. The end of the hegemony of the United States on the world stage and the rise of China could occur as happened during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, without China militarily defeating the United States, or it will be repeated what happened historically with the military confrontation between the great powers and the outbreak of World War III, which could lead to the extinction of human species. If the great powers use their nuclear arsenals, the most likely scenario is that a military confrontation will occur unless there is a mobilization of peoples and countries that love world peace and seek to prevent the outbreak of World War III. It's clear that as long as there is a weapons industry in the world, wars will continue to proliferate throughout the planet. World peace will only come about when all countries disarm and cease manufacturing weapons. As long as the American arms industry continues to dictate U.S. foreign policy, war with China is a real possibility that may become inevitable. My friends, I hope that our presentation was enlightening to demonstrate the risk of the outbreak of World War III with the military strategies of the United States and China in the fight of global hegemony. Receive my brotherly hug.